Okay, so if you ask me what my favourite film is out of the entire MCU, I would probably say my personal favourite is Avengers Endgame. I mean, purely that one, the climax is just purely awesome. However, if you were to ask me what's my favourite series of the MCU, that's a little bit more tricky. I mean, I know some people will go for sort of like the Captain America films, the MCU Spider-Man films. Some of you may go for the Iron Man films, or some of you may even go for Thor or the Guardians of the Galaxy. But if I was to say which is my favourite character series of the MCU, I think I would probably give that to Black Panther, the two Black Panther films, because honestly, I think that these films not only have a great story and some great kind of dialogue and action, but they're also beautiful to look at. The Wakandan culture they've created for these films is just beautiful to take in. I mean, watching the films through and seeing them come to Wakanda, seeing the architecture, the music, the kind of different rituals and the different tribes, I actually think these films are just wonderful to take in. And we come to the 30th MCU film from 2022, Black Panther Wakanda Forever. Now, this was a film that sadly had a bit of a troubled path before it finally made it to the screen. Because, let me fill you in. Because following on from Avengers Endgame, they did actually have a plan going forward for the Avengers and for Black Panther. Because it was planned now that with Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark and Chris Evans' Steve Rogers now out of the MCU, it was planned that for the next set of Avengers films, i.e. Avengers the Kang Dynasty, aka now Avengers Doomsday, and Avengers Secret Wars, that the Avengers would now be led by a new trio of leaders, namely Chadwick Boseman's Black Panther, Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and Brie Larson's Captain Marvel. However, gradually a series of events happened that ultimately made the leader of the team now slightly dubious. Namely, the breakdown of the deal between Sony and Marvel at the end of Phase 3, the shortcomings of the Marvels, and also the firing of Jonathan Majors as Kang. But ultimately the event that made everything really tailspin was the death of actor Chadwick Boseman in 2020. He'd been battling colon cancer pretty much the entire time he'd been playing Black Panther, playing T'Challa. But in 2020, Chadwick Boseman sadly lost his battle and died at the age of 43. So, after this happened, there was a little bit of a kind of tailspin event of people wondering what was going to happen, because I believe the Black Panther sequel had already been announced that it was going to happen. So it was now a question of how exactly they were going to continue with it. Like, I saw that people kind of suggesting ways of how they could kind of keep Black Panther going, like possibly keep T'Challa going in the MCU, like what castings would be good. And I even saw one that suggested they bring back Michael B. Jordan's Eric Killmonger from the previous film and give him something of a redemption arc where he eventually becomes Black Panther. However, it was eventually decided that they would do something similar to what they did with Black Panther in the comics. Because in the comics, for a while, T'Challa had to leave planet Earth in order to go and fight some stuff in space. I'm not exactly sure of the specifics, but while he was away, his sister Shuri took on her own kind of persona as the Black Panther and took over protecting Wakanda. And that's essentially what they did with this particular film. In this particular film, at the beginning of the film, you see Shuri, played once again by Letitia Wright, in her lab trying to find a way to recreate the heart-shaped herb that previously gave the Black Panther throughout history their powers and their abilities. It had having previously been destroyed by Michael B. Jordan's Eric Killmonger in the previous film. However, she is not quick enough to recreate the heart-shaped herb, and Black Panther T'Challa dies off screen from an unspecified illness. To which I do want to say quickly for the beginning of this film, when we see T'Challa's funeral and all of the Wakandans kind of mourning their lost king, I will admit, I don't know what funeral cultures are like in other parts of the world, but as someone who's British, I'll just say that black for a funeral seems fairly safe. Like, if people turn up in black to a funeral, nobody would raise an eye. But given that the people of Wakanda worshipped the Black Panther, and the Black Panther was their hero, to see the entirety of Wakanda dressed in white for their king's funeral, it's honestly quite beautiful, very pleasing to look at. And it does feel rather fitting for a film like this. But anyway, 1 year later, Queen Ramonda, played by Angela Bassett, has taken back over as Queen of Wakanda following T'Challa's death, and she's reluctant to share vibranium supplies with the rest of the world, because Wakanda doesn't have entirety of vibranium. They don't have all the vibranium in the world, but they do have the largest stockpile, and she's unwilling to deal with other countries knowing that things could turn out bad. So other countries begin looking for vibranium elsewhere in the world, and they eventually end up disturbing a tribe from the kingdom of Talakan, led by their king Namor, played by Tenoch Huerta Mejia, a name I've almost certainly mispronounced, I apologise. And Namor and his people, including his cousin Namora, played by Mabel Cadena, they ultimately want to protect their kingdom and protect their own stockpiles and their own interests. So they want to track down a scientist who created a vibranium detector named Riri Williams, played by Dominic Thorne, who's a student at MIT and has also created her own Iron Man style suit called the Iron Heart. To which, while trying to track her down, Namor and the people of Talakan come to blows with the kingdom of Wakanda, to which Namor tries to reason with Shuri for them to join forces and to ultimately attack the rest of the world, going, if the rest of the world is going to attack us, we strike first. But that kind of leads Shuri into paths that she's unsure about, eventually leading her to take on her own personality as the Black Panther and defend Wakanda against Talakan and the rest of the world. Ultimately, first thing I want to talk about is the character of Namor, because Namor, I think everyone has that one comic character that when they say they're going to adapt it to the big screen, you're like, how exactly are they going to do that with the design they had on screen? Like, I've heard people say that with Captain America, I've heard people say that with Thor. Namor was the one character I was unsure exactly how this would play out. Because in the comics, Namor was a muscular guy with slick black hair. His top half was always naked. He had pointy ears. He wore green trunks and had wings on his heels. To me, I was just like, how are they going to adapt this and make us take him seriously? But I will admit they did it. I mean, the casting of Huerta Mejia, he does a really good job in the role, and along with the design that they finally sorted up on the character and also the direction, he didn't look silly, and I did buy him as a legitimate threat. Like, when it ultimately came down to a final battle in the desert between him and Letitia Wright's Shuri, I honestly felt the build-up between the two, and the two did have legitimate chemistry together. Again, watching it through, it did feel to me like the previous Black Panther film when Chadwick Boseman was going up against Michael B. Jordan. You felt the tension, you felt that build-up, and you really kind of felt the anger behind those words. The casting, once again, is almost pitch perfect. As I said, there's Huerta Mejia as Namor, but then also you got Letitia Wright back as Shuri. Nice to see her again. We've also got most of the Wakanda's return again, including Nakia, played by Lupita Nyong'o, Okoye, played by Danai Gurira, and Ramonda, played by Angela Bassett, Ayo, played by Florence Kasumba, and Annika, played by Michaela Cole. And also my personal favourite returns, M'Baku, played by Winston Duke. Now, I know that in the comics, M'Baku does eventually become a villain to the Black Panther, becoming the villain known as Man-Ape. Kind of similar to Black Panther, only his kind of animal being is kind of like a huge white gorilla. But here's the thing about M'Baku. From the two films and what we've seen of his journey, if he never actually became a full villain, I think I'd be okay with that. Because M'Baku, to me, he's an interesting character. Because, take in the first film, for example, when he kind of was facing off against T'Challa, when T'Challa ultimately defeated him at the kind of ceremony at the waterfall, M'Baku doesn't kind of rage against him. He doesn't declare war. He doesn't kind of storm off in terror. He goes, okay, I lost, but I do want power, yes, but I'll go off. I'll train harder. I'll come back, and we'll see what happens again next time. And in that time, you are king. To which I like that for a character. I like him as a character. Just the fact that he clearly does want power. He does want to show how truly strong he is, but that he is someone who is willing to accept things as they are. And I feel that hasn't really changed in Wakanda Forever. When you'd see Shuri come in her new suit, he's the kind of first one to say to her, after challenging her strength, she's like, "The Black Panther has returned." To which, yeah, I do like that. You've also, once again, got the return of Everett K. Ross, played by Martin Freeman. And I personally think his kind of accent has gotten better. I remember when I first saw Captain America Civil War, I felt that Martin Freeman's accent, after hearing him for so long in Sherlock, I felt him trying to do an American accent sounded a bit odd, but I think by now he's got it down. And we also see his ex-wife, named Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who apparently she should show up as one of the members of the Thunderbolts in an upcoming film, to which it'll be interesting to see how she plays out, but I think she does well here. And ultimately, I think this film comes down to a film about grief. And as we do see Shuri at various points going through the various stages, kind of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance throughout the entire film. And I do like that. As I said, the climax is okay. The only thing that I felt I had a little bit of a problem with was partway through the film when, spoiler alert, you see Namor attack Wakanda and eventually end up killing off Ramonda. To which, ordinarily, this wouldn't be that big of a deal, but I just kind of felt at the time that it was maybe copying Thor the Dark World a little bit, as long-time viewers will know that Thor the Dark World for me was the weakest of all the MCU movies, but I don't know, it just kind of felt like they were repeating that a bit. But then again, killing off a main character's parents, that's par for the course in comic books, so I guess I can't complain too much about it. But once again, I thought this was a great film kind of showing grief, and I do love the moments right at the end of the film when Shuri goes off to visit Nakia in Haiti to visit her son, and she does something that she was unwilling to do earlier in the film, which is burn her funeral robes, because that's kind of part of their culture. And her just sitting and remembering her brother, showing clips from the previous film just silently, that to me felt like a very powerful moment. And I still think the original Black Panther I regard as one of the best Marvel films, and I'd say the sequel is once again up there. Is it the greatest of all the Marvel films? That'll be up to personal choice, but I do think both this and the previous Black Panther, they're up there. They're definitely high up on my list. So, I may be 2 years late kind of watching it through and reviewing it, but I finally have reviewed Black Panther Wakanda Forever, and I do think it's one of Marvel's best. Anyway, the other Marvel film that I watched recently after having put it off for a long time was Multiverse of Madness. What do I think of that? Well, you have to wait and see. And until then, see ya.